Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Whether it's spring planting, fall harvesting, or just a drive across the state, soy biodiesel helps a diesel-powered engine operate in a demanding job. Soybean oil from Nebraska soybeans makes biodiesel a renewable fuel that's also environmentally responsible. The soybean checkoff plays a major role in supporting the use and availability of biodiesel. The Nebraska Soybean Board, growing opportunity from the ground up.
No matter how you look at it, animal agriculture helps Nebraska's economy. The livestock industry provides increased tax revenues for schools and community services. Livestock enterprises also create jobs while contributing to existing businesses such as local banks and grocery stores. A thriving livestock industry helps maintain our current way of life, but also provides opportunities for the next generation of farm families. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff helps to raise awareness of the importance of animal agriculture to Nebraska.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Mike Briggs analyzes cattle markets. Tamra Jackson-Ziems talks about the confirmation of southern rust in Nebraska. Keith Lewin outlines the 2014 soybean management field days. Greg Ibach explains the Non-Hormone Treated Cattle Program. And Amit Jalla discusses new soybean seed variety testing. Mike Briggs is our marketing analyst this week. As of July 1st, U.S. farmers and ranchers were holding the fewest number of cattle and calves since the USDA began tracking that data in 1973. After a year off due to budget sequestration, the agency's July cattle inventory report estimated a total of 95 million cattle and calves in the U.S. Other numbers Friday show Texas maintained the top spot over Nebraska in cattle on feed. As the country's leader in cattle slaughter, cattle are not only a big part of this state's livestock industry, they're also big consumers of corn and soybeans. Nebraska's cattle account for about 25% of the state's soybean meal consumption, and the current crop of both soybeans and corn remain in historically notable condition. We talked with Mike Wednesday morning as feeder cattle futures reached to new highs, making it a good time to be a feeder.
It's been great. It's really been a lot of fun to feed cattle again.
Yeah, how has it stayed this high for this long?
Great question. It's truly a supply-driven issue. Well, it's a supply and demand-driven issue, just like it always is. You don't have your cow beef, your cow supplies are down so far, and your cow slaughter is down so far, and that's where your main consumer ingredient comes from. That's hamburger. So you've had to go ahead and grind the ends on these fat cattle to meet the hamburger demand. So it's been a great deal for us, and that's truly what's holding this up, and that's what's going to hold us up as we go forward, because the cow slaughter is never going to reach last year's levels. Even when we come into the fall and see that second wave of cow slaughter, I don't think it's going to reach last year's levels, and I don't think the feed yard supplies are going to be there. So I think this thing's around to stay for a little bit.
Right, that's what I was going to say. With those things in mind, you expect the feeder contracts to stay that high?
I think so. I think that it's quite possibly go higher, because it all depends a lot. We're really starting to see, as we've talked a little bit last time, the consumer preference for hamburger come through. They want that stuff, and they're willing to pay more for it. I think we may find out how much they're willing to pay for it, because I'm afraid grind meat is going to be in and stay in a short supply.
Live cattle have also stayed really high. Has that narrowed margins at all?
Oh, yeah. It's pretty hard to replace what you sell. It really is difficult. Now, the fact that our supply, the raw product, the corn and everything has gone down so much, that's helped margins. But yeah, they've been squeezed quite a little, because people have made a lot of money. The feeder supply, cattle supply is short, so a lot of people are chasing a very small amount of feeders.
Have you changed the number of days you're keeping these animals in the feedlot?
That's a great question. Here, no. A lot of places, yes. And the reason is, and what has confused a lot of market prognosticators this year is the fact that they saw huge carcass weights. Well, people must be holding cattle. And we've heard it all summer. Oh, there's going to be a lot of cattle for July and August. There's no cattle for July and August. And the reason was cattle got pulled ahead. And the reason they got pulled ahead was the weather has been so good, performance has been so good that they got to market ready weights 2 and 3 and maybe even as much as 4 weeks ahead of schedule. They were very profitable, so people sold them. And so you've sold cattle 20 days ahead on average. So you've sold these cattle because they're making money, and everybody has the fear that this market's just going to fall on its back. I don't think it's going to, but so people were always pushing their marketings, even though on paper, because of carcass size, it didn't appear so.
You mentioned the cost of corn right now. USDA is expecting record yields come harvest, and the crop looks to be off to a pretty darn good start. Actually,
we need some rain here in the Western Corn Belt, but yeah, I don't think anybody has a problem east of us.
Yeah, what are you doing buying corn now?
Hand to mouth, because my gosh, every time I buy it, it drops another 10 cents. So I've had to go hand to mouth. I've gone hand to mouth on all my commodities. Hay, distiller's grain. Now one of these days I'll probably get myself caught, but I'll worry about that when it starts going up, because right now there's no reason to chase this stuff.
I think the last time we talked, we were talking about how high distillers' prices were because China was taking everything. That's not the case anymore, no?
No, they've backed off significantly, and you've actually seen some more plants come online at a time of year where there isn't a lot of distiller's grain demand because numbers in feed yards are lower. So you've seen that stuff have a pretty precipitous drop.
Has the packer been able to make his money as well?
Apparently so, because he hasn't stopped killing them, and there's an awful lot of competition out there to harvest what there is to harvest. So it's a great situation, and I want everybody to make money. I hope they make money. We need that because we don't want them to go away.
All things considered, coming off of that big drought, this has to be among the best cases of scenario you could have imagined, no?
Oh, absolutely. Coming off a drought like this with $8 corn and all the things that were, it just looked like there was never going to be an end in sight 2 years ago. And now, yeah, you couldn't ask for anything better.
Next week, John Moret from J.E. Moret Grain Company will join us to analyze corn and soybean markets leading up to the USDA's August crop report. Nearly 3/4 of Nebraska's corn crop was rated good to excellent in the latest USDA state condition reports, but the state also now has recorded its first case of a potential problem. UNL Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems joined us near East Campus Thursday and said we're seeing the first instance of southern rust.
We are, and so we've got confirmation of southern rust in Otoe County. That's near Nebraska City right now in southeast Nebraska. And we've got some other examples of samples that are suspect and being submitted at this point.
You say that there's also some common rust in fields across Nebraska. Why is it important to diagnose the difference between southern rust and common rust?
Well, that's right. We've got common rust every year, and common rust just isn't the threat that southern rust is. Common rust is not as aggressive, and we do have a low level of resistance in most of our commercial hybrids. In contrast, though, southern rust, that pathogen is very aggressive, and we have no resistance to it essentially. And so if it does move in and we have a lot of pressure, it could become a yield limiting factor, but we're not there yet. It's very sparsely distributed at this point.
How would you tell the difference between southern rust and common rust?
Well, there's a few characteristics I hope people will look for. In general, we tell people to look at the color of the spores or the pustules produced and where they're being produced. And so southern rust is usually limited to just the top surface. Now, common rust can sporulate on both the upper and lower leaf surface, but sometimes when common rust first begins, it starts more on the top, and so people who notice it early in the infection process might be easily confused, like the sample that I'm showing here.
How high is the threat that it could still spread to northern areas of Nebraska?
Well, the threat is there, and so I want people to be aware and check out the Crop Watch articles for updates. We do have a lot of southern rust in states to our south, and so there's a lot of fungal inoculum that could still blow up with southern winds. And so a lot of this will depend on wind patterns and weather conditions, and so of course, like most fungi, they use a lot of humidity and moisture to germinate and infect.
Which fields would be at the highest risk?
Well, I hope people will especially pay close attention to replanted or late planted corn, and we've got an awful lot of that. And so those fields, if they become infested with this disease, are ones that would be at the highest risk for yield loss.
So widespread areas, your recommendation is not treatment at this point?
That's right. Right now, we're not there yet. And so this is something that could develop over the next several weeks. And if people pull the trigger too early, the protection will be gone before the real threat comes.
Tamra says the state is still seeing both Gossa's wilt and northern corn leaf blight spread in some fields. She advises producers to continue scouting and be familiar with hybrid ratings. Nebraska Farmer has featured numerous livestock operations where families are bringing the next generation back to the farm. The August Nebraska Farmer does so again with a feature article on the Thiele dairy near Clearwater. In the multi-family operation, Bill Thiele works with brothers Tom and Ron and their families, as well as his mother Mary Ann. They're now ready to expand the dairy to handle 2 more families, to include his nephews Scott and Luke. Bill says it's important to them to continue with the farm and dairy and be an asset to the community. You can read more about the family in the August Nebraska Farmer. The 2014 Soybean Management Field Days take place during August at 4 locations across the state. They begin in Auburn, move to Shickley, then Belgrade, and finish near Snyder. The field days are sponsored by the Nebraska Soybean Board and UNL Extension. We recently discussed the events with UNL Extension educator Keith Cluin.
Back in 1999, I believe it was, we partnered with the Nebraska Soybean Board. It's been a great partnership to provide growers, soybean growers across the state with unbiased in-field research-based information by conducting these field days. And for the first dozen years, we were planting soybeans as a backdrop and using them in demonstrations and so forth. And in recent years, we've actually replicated research studies at these sites. So we're not only using those research studies to get growers out in the field to see what we're talking about, but we're also capturing yields at the end of the growing season and then providing that yield information back to growers in a report. And last year we sent I believe 15,000 copies to soybean growers around the state. Thanks again to the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Of course. This year you'll be at Auburn, Shickley, Belgrade, and Snyder. Will the topics at these locations be consistent across all 4 fields, or will they vary at all?
No, that's correct. They're consistent at all 4, so unless you're really excited, you probably catch most of it by attending one location. And those topics happen to be topics we think that are really relevant in regards to soybean production. To give you an idea, we spend a lot of money as soybean growers on what we call growth enhancement products, products that that growers think will boost their yields. So we're evaluating some of those products, and we're talking about how those products may or may not work. Another study, which is very huge in size, is a study where we're looking at different, again, management practices such as the use of insecticides, both with seed treatments as well as foliar applied later in the growing season, fungicides, row spacing, and we're going to be looking at, in that study, where we have all those treatments combined together. And then the next set of treatments is all those minus 1. So it's called a factorial design. So
of course, yeah.
Yep. And
you don't have to tell me that, Keith.
It's it's very large, but it's very provides a lot of information. And so we're really looking forward to seeing again the results of that study this year.
One of the other topics will be grain markets, and there's probably still some in the bin before we get ready for harvest here in only a few months.
Do you think? Yeah, that's quite the buzz right now in the farming community. There's a lot of unpriced grain that's still sitting in the bins from last year. And yes, that is a topic which we'll address. Jeff Peterson will focus on that issue along with Brad Lubin, who's of course our marketing or policy specialist here at UNL.
Now, did all 4 of your locations manage to escape the widespread hail we've seen so far across the state this year?
Yes, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, okay?
You're living good. That must be it. The field days start at 9 o'clock. Pre-registration isn't required. Each site will provide a complimentary lunch. For more information on topics at the 2014 Soybean Management Field Days, you can visit ardc.unl.edu/soydays. Since 1999, U.S. beef producers have had the ability to produce cattle in the Non-Hormone Treated Cattle Program. The NHTC program was put in place to help with beef trade between this country and the European Union. As the nation's leading producer of cattle, the NHTC program could help Nebraska's farmers and ranchers add value to their product. Nebraska Department of Ag Director Greg Ibach joined us Thursday to discuss the program at a time when many consumers want to know who produces their food.
Well, I think we're seeing a trend for consumers to want to know more about where their food comes from, and whether that's fruits and vegetables that they go to the farmer's market to purchase, or whether it's beef. A story that goes along with that product is helping drive value.
One of the programs offered in Nebraska across the country actually is the Non-Hormone Treated Cattle NHTC program. I believe it's been around for about 15 years. Can you tell me a little bit about what that program is?
Well, that's the program that allows beef from Nebraska and other U.S. states to go into the European market. And Nebraska really has an advantage in that market, in that most of the packing plants that are approved under that program are located here in Nebraska, and we have quite a few feedlots that are approved under that program. So it provides an opportunity for Nebraska's cow-calf producers to become certified in that program, to be able to receive a premium from their calves that have not been implanted that are eligible to go to Europe.
How would you have to change your operation in order to comply with that?
Well, for many producers, there's probably no changes that would take place in their operation if they don't use implants now and go through the certification process to verify that. Their cattle are probably able to be verified today before they market them this fall to be eligible to receive premiums under that program.
How hard is the certification program then?
It's not very hard. We have several Nebraska companies that do that, and several national companies that are active in Nebraska that do that. In fact, the department is hosting some meetings later this month in O'Neill, Valentine, and Alliance to help producers learn more about that process.
Question and answer type of thing, or an opportunity for producers just to kind of gain a hold of what this is?
I think the whole gambit of that. We're going to have opportunities to see some short presentations. We're going to have opportunities for question and answer at this meeting. And then we're going to have those companies that do the verification. We're going to have feedlots that are looking to buy cattle that are eligible under the NHTC program. And we're even going to have packing plant representatives there that are looking for cattle so that they can harvest them and ship them to Europe.
Overall, this is another move towards a traceability aspect of consumer selection?
Well, there's definitely traceability, because you have to know where the animal was born, raised, fed, and slaughtered in order for them to be eligible under this program. And then you also have to verify some production protocols. So it's just another way for producers to maybe gain a little bit of an edge or an advantage over producers that aren't participating in this program and enjoy some of the premiums that are available.
As Greg mentioned, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture is hosting presentations on verification programs in O'Neill, Valentine, and Alliance during the second week of August. While an RSVP isn't required, you're asked to call the department for a head count, since a steak dinner will be served. That number can be found at the bottom of your screen. Of the soybeans planted in Nebraska this spring, 95% were a herbicide-tolerant variety. While that technology has allowed farmers to control weeds in a different way, resistance in those weeds has spread at an alarming rate. At a recent weed management field day near Clay Center, we talked with Amit Jalla about new soybean varieties that could eventually come to market and the importance of weed management plans when they do.
For the last few years, we have been testing dicamba-resistant soybean that will also be resistant to glyphosate. So it's more like a combination of dicamba plus glyphosate-resistant soybean, and we have seen some good results, especially in last few years. We have conducted experiments in Lincoln to control glyphosate-resistant maize tail, and we had some good results because you can apply dicamba on top of the soybean. Otherwise, soybean is usually very sensitive to dicamba, but this dicamba cultivar that is being developed is resistant to dicamba as well. So you can apply dicamba actually 2 or 3 times in a split application.
What about Balanced GT? Is that a variety as well?
Balanced GT is a new herbicide resistant soybean that might commercialize in near future. Balance Flex is actually corn herbicide where active ingredient is isoxaflutol. So now industry is coming up with soybean variety that will be resistant to this isoxaflutol herbicide, and this will be actually the first soybean variety that will be resistant to any pre-emergence herbicide, because whatever currently available in the market, for example glyphosate resistant soybean that are resistant to glyphosate, and also Liberty Link soybean that is resistant to glufosinate Liberty herbicide, those are both post-emergence herbicides. But this Balanced GT is the first variety of soybean that will be resistant to residual herbicides like isoxaflutol. So it might provide an additional pre-emergence herbicide tool for soybean growers to include in their overall weed control program.
When the first resistant varieties of soybeans came to the market, farmers loved them because they were easier to control. But now that these are coming and we've seen resistance issues develop in weeds, what are the important things for growers to know before they, just use a similar plan than they would have in the past?
I think growers should learn from the experience. The way we have used glyphosate resistant soybean is probably responsible for creating or evolving herbicide resistant weeds now. So now growers know that if we will relying on single herbicide or single herbicide mode of action, then at some point we would end up with having herbicide resistant weeds. So I think now from past experience, growers will try to include some other herbicides or herbicide with different mode of actions or different methods for weed control for overall herbicide program or overall weed control program.
The 2 varieties that we've talked about today, when could they become commercially available?
There is no any exact answer because there are a number of factors involved in this. Currently dicamba resistant soybean is under environmental impact assessment by USDA. So when that environmental impact assessment will be completed, it might be available for commercial release, and I think it is same thing with Balanced GT soybean. It is currently under trials by industry and also in university trials. So for last couple of years we have been testing this both dicamba resistant soybean plus Balanced GT soybean, and also we are also testing 2,4-D resistant soybean. So all 3 varieties nothing is available commercially right now, and it is hard to say when, but at some point it might be available.
We'll have more on the rise of weed resistance in future episodes of Market Journal. Now with his weekly weather forecast, here's UNL Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. The big news during this last week was the well below normal temperatures, combined with pretty much a lack of precipitation for most of the state outside of extreme northeastern Nebraska and the southwest corner and southern panhandle. Northeast Nebraska seen most of their precipitation occur during the Saturday night through Sunday morning time frame. For southwest and the southern panhandle, looking more in the Tuesday night to Wednesday time frame. These cool temperatures have saved us somewhat because, of course, less heat, less evaporation demands, but one more significant concern is the lack of significant moisture for a good portion of the state during the month of July, which makes 3 straight Julys that we've had to deal with this type of an issue. And we've seen an upgrade in the drought monitor to abnormally dry conditions over portions of eastern and south central Nebraska. I would have been more aggressive with the painting of abnormally dry conditions, but the drought monitor authors didn't feel that it was warranted. Certainly if we go precipitation free through next Tuesday, I see no reason why we won't see a more expansive area of abnormal dryness and possibly even the introduction of moderate drought conditions across portions of southern Nebraska. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store for precipitation. We have this trough that has basically been persistent across the Great Lakes region. It's starting to weaken. We're starting to see this ridge move in, so much warmer conditions, more like normal temperatures in eastern Nebraska, slightly above normal in western Nebraska. There is a possibility of an isolated to scattered thunderstorm activity developing over the eastern half of the state this afternoon through this evening as the energy moves around the ridge. But more importantly, as we go into tomorrow, we'll start to see this ridge expand, bringing much warmer conditions to the western part of the state, probably 3 to 5 degree increase. We still carry an isolated chance for thunderstorm activity across extreme eastern Nebraska, but more importantly, as we get into Monday, the ridge takes firm planting hold of the southern plains, and we see this moisture coming out of the southwest that's going to run around this ridge, so we have the increasing chances of precipitation across the panhandle, and as it skirts around the ridge, we have the ability to maybe generate some thunderstorm activity across north central and northeastern Nebraska. Now, as we go into Tuesday, the ridge starts to break down. That's going to allow a little bit cooler air to move in, so whatever tropical moisture is left over may interact with this front and generate some scattered shower activity across the northern 1/3 and 1/2 of the state. More importantly, as we get to Wednesday, we have a little bit better chance of moisture developing statewide as this cool air presses a little bit farther southward, interacts with this monsoon moisture, and we get some overrunning of this front. And that looks like our best opportunity for widespread precipitation statewide. Time we get to Thursday, we'll be looking at more colder air moving in with just a chance for scattered thunderstorm activity across the northern part of the state, less of a chance across the south. As we get into Friday, this cool air remains in place, and we may generate some scattered thunderstorm activity statewide, although it does look isolated at this point in time. So the temperature forecast as we go through this week, warm conditions during the first half of the forecast period, and then we slowly cool down the middle of the week before we start to warm up once again down the Friday time frame. As we look at the 8 to 14 day forecast for next Thursday following Tuesday, looks like slightly cooler than normal temperatures will continue in terms of precipitation above normal for the southern plains, possibly moving into southern Nebraska.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews on cattle markets, southern rust in corn, the 2014 Soybean Management Field Days, the Non-Hormone Treated Cattle Program, and new soybean varieties can be found on the Market Journal website and the Market Journal mobile app. Next week, John Moret will analyze corn and soybean markets, and Bob Wright will update us on the presence of soybean aphids. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Animal agriculture is vital to Nebraska. Livestock production not only contributes to our food supply, but also helps our rural communities. Livestock provides revenue for schools, creates jobs, supports Main Street, and enhances the future for farm families. The Nebraska Soybean Board's Animal Agriculture Initiative works to encourage growth of responsible livestock enterprises to benefit agriculture and Nebraska.
America's export of soybeans helps the U.S. maintain a positive agricultural trade balance. Nebraska contributes half of its soybeans for export. The protein and oil content in soybeans enhance the growing demand for higher protein diets. The Nebraska Soybean Board promotes research to develop new soybean varieties with higher protein and oil content for major agricultural markets. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.